They're twisting the text. They are trying to conceal its true meaning. We've heard, but their edits are shallow. The truth will out someday.
But what about our Meccan fishermen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I brought my fishing rod. I'm going to Mecca because Islam is inclusive for everybody, so anyone can go.
It's very inclusive.
Fishing rod. I'm going to get some fish. I'm going to bring you back a salmon.
You can farm, you can fish, you can trade. There's room for everyone. And as we will see, the Quran has the same trait as with the farmers. It depicts supposedly the ones that are listening to the proclamations, as some of them as being fishermen. There are many references in the Quran to sailing to the sea and so on. Some of the people, some of the audience rode on ships and were guided by stars on land and sea. So one could argue that in Mecca, maybe because it was such a huge hub and there were so many people coming from all over Arabia, there might have been fishermen. And this is why the preacher, Muhammad, used references to sailing. But there's a
solution to this, because camels are called the ships of the desert, for the simple reason that they're filled with Arabian seamen.
But here it's clearly about sailing in boats with sails.
That was an off-color joke, by the way.
So that the ship may sail at his command, and so you may seek of his bounty. Okay.
Bounty,
but here it's something else. You see, you the audience, you see the ships going through, so that you may seek of his bounty. His bounty might be the fishes that the fishermen fish.
Or the jury.
Again, it's addressed to the audience. There is a you. You see the ships. It is he who makes the ships sail on the sea, so that you, the audience, you, my brave Meccan, you may seek of his bounty, with variants in other verses. And there is also description of people being caught in storms at sea. So there is this many references to sailing, to fishing, and they are addressed to an actual audience who fishes and sails. And furthermore, it is said that this audience eats from it's the product of its own fishing. You eat from the sea tender meat, and you extract ornaments which you wear. The ornaments could have been pearls, for example. But it is speaking here also of not dried fish or dried sea. What do you call it? You eat fish, but also I don't have the word for it. Shells and so on. The many products of the sea. They are described as being tender. And if you look at the location of Mecca, there is a 3 to 4 days walk from the sea to Mecca. So you cannot eat fresh fish in Mecca, not tender meat as it is described in the Quran. Yeah. So it means.
Odi, brother, in the interpretation of Al-Tabari to Quran 16:14, he's talking about fresh water and salt water.
Yeah, there is this subject also.
You need rivers. I do not know where can we find some rivers in Mecca.
Yeah. There is also this issue. Let's get to it, because the Quran proclamation to the Meccan to the Meccans depicts them as fishing in two seas.
Yeah.
And they are making use of the resources of both a sea of fresh water and a sea of salt water.
Yeah,
And
because you can say they went to the Red Sea and catch some fish from Mecca to the Red Sea, but I do not know where can he find some rivers between Mecca and anywhere else near it.
It's not about rivers. It's about a large body of water, a large body of fresh water, a lake, a big lake.
Ponds, lakes, rivers. Yeah.
But even without the reference to the fresh water, I don't think it is possible in the 7th century to have fresh fish in Mecca taken from the Red Sea, which has to be brought on camel's back. It takes 4 days in harsh climate.
They have these freezers.
The fish can remain fresh, and the meat tender, maybe.
Brother, they put them on the freezers in the back of the camels, and by the time they get to Mecca, the fish still fresh. You know.
Can I just jump in? I've seen what they do in Portugal with fish. They cut them in half and they hang them for days and dry them out. So I don't think that's in itself a problem. But I think just in general, I think it does suggest that we're dealing with a coastal location, and Mecca is definitely not a coastal location. So I think if we go back to the original ideas we have of a northern narrative going on, for example, it's easy to find potential locations where you can find fresh water and seawater.
Yeah, even in Madrid,
pictures of this location to show you.
Fish from, even in Madrid, even the 1500s, 1600s, 1800s, they had a problem getting fish from the coast to Madrid. If they had a problem doing that in Europe, then, I mean, Mecca in the 7th century, no way. Sorry, Odon?
May I add something? So, as you know, I try to read the Quran in a neutral fashion, just removing the standard Islamic narrative. And I've never explored these verses, but the moment that Odon said earlier, fishermen of Mecca, the first thing that jumped into my mind, the moment he said fishermen, was the apostles. Like immediately, like Peter, there are lots of stories about that. So maybe it has nothing to do. Maybe it has nothing to do with that, and it is another preacher in the area just telling people who are fishermen and stuff. But maybe some of those verses are a direct link to Peter and so on. Maybe so, more for exploring.
I noticed that there's. I noticed in the Red Sea there's a very valuable oyster called the black lip pearls. It's one of the largest pearls that you can get. So it may not necessarily be away from the Red Sea. The Aqaba could be a good location where a lot of things meet.
We'll see.
Wasn't it part of the cosmology of the ancient world? They thought that there were two bodies of water outside of the earth, as it were. That you had the fresh water up in the heavens where it comes down as rain, and you have the salt water on which the earth is floating. And so they've just been referring to those as the two seas, the two bodies of water.
No, Brother Paul, when Muhammad talk about the two sea fresh water, talk about the barrier between them. Yeah. And that is some of the things which Muslims try to say today, that how did Muhammad know the barrier between the fresh and the salt water? Obviously, something was known 500 years before Muhammad, was a gleam in his father's eyes by some of the scientists who know it and describes it. So,
I want to address that, but first let's look at what the Quran says about these two seas. In verse 12, Surah 35. The proclamation goes, and not alike are the two bodies of water. Please here note that this is the dual form of the word al-Barani. It's not just two bodies; it's the dual form. It can only be two. One is fresh and sweet, palatable for drinking and so on, and one is salty and bitter. And from each you eat tender meat and extract ornaments which you wear. And you see the ships throwing through them that you make thick of his bounty, and perhaps you will be grateful. So here, the audience eats and fishes and from both bodies of water, and it uses resources from both bodies of water. So we have to look for a location where we have a sea water, a sea of seawater, a sea salty and bitter, and not very far from here must be a lake of fresh and sweet, palatable for drinking water. Where do we find this kind of?
There is an obvious thing.
I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Sorry, there is an obvious place, Bahrain, which literally is the etymology is two seas.
Exactly.
So it could be really obvious. It mightn't be a mystery.
Exactly. I will present you the different hypotheses for this location. But it is something that is it's not only in one verse. There is other verses about these two bodies of water, the two seas, one fresh and sweet and one salty and bitter. And there is this mention that you referred to, Usama, the barrier. He placed between them a barrier and a prohibiting partition. So the two bodies of seas are separated. There is a partition, a barrier between them. He released the two seas, meeting side by side. So it's an interpretation of the Islamic narrative. Between them is a barrier, so neither of them transgresses. So which of the favors of your Lord would you deny? And from both of them emerge pearl and coral. So
Lloyd, if you don't mind, can you read the comment I have in my Quran before that verse 25, 53?
In your
if you
Quran,
don't mind, there's a bold, in the Quran 25, 53. There's a bold statement I put there. I think it's very important.
53, sorry.
It's true, yes. Just a bold statement before it. I hate to lose it and don't come back to it.
I have it here. Hold on. Let me just share my screen quickly. Give me a moment. I'm just going to bring it up. Takes a moment.
It's one of the great miracle Muslims are using in the West today to prove to the world that Muhammad was a true prophet.
This one here.
No. You're not in chapter 25, bro. Chapter 25.
Oh, 25. I thought you said 55.
55.
Sorry, the audio.
55, 53.
And then you go to before verse 53. Keep going. That you got it. You got it.
This one?
Yeah.
The prophetic ability of Muhammad.
With the knowledge of the separation between fresh water and salt water was not a new discovery. Pliny the Elder, Roman naturalist, senator, and commander of the imperial fleet in the 1st century, observed this behavior of fishermen's nets in the Straits of Bosphorus near Istanbul. Been there too. I did a trip on that river, but anyway, in that area. But Pliny deduced that the surface and bottom currents were flowing in opposite directions. He provided the first written documentation of what is now called the estuarine circulation. Additionally, it can be shown from logic that the fresh and salt waters do eventually combine. If they did not, there would be huge oceans of fresh water continually growing out from every major river. Simple studies show that fresh water flowing out from rivers slowly mixes with and becomes increasingly salinated over time, and distance until it reaches equilibrium with the normal salt levels of the greater body of water. The speed of the change varies according to temperature.
Sure.
Yep. So,
nonetheless, there are some Muslims who.
Yes.
Go on, JC.
Yes, something very, very quickly that I try to say every single time for people who are not very familiar with this. So all of these things that we are saying, it is in the exegete that says that all of this is about Mecca, but the Quran never actually claims that, because Mecca is only mentioned in one place in the Quran specifically, and it has nothing to do with that. So all of this information that we are told is Mecca is because someone else, like the wonderful Ibn Kathir tells us that it is Mecca. It's the traditions, but the Quran never really says that.
Yeah. When Makaraba being Mecca only occurs in 1647 by Bokhart. So that reference is only 400 years old. It's not an ancient reference. It was made up literally by a European in the 1600s.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this, it's about confronting the Islamic narrative. This narrative has invented interpretation for the Quran, and when the Quran describes farmers or fishermen, this narrative posits that they are in Mecca, which is obviously not possible. So the narrative is false. It was somewhere else that these proclamations were proclaimed. So the question here is, where are the two seas? There is something to be addressed here. We already have Mel's answer, which is Bahrain, which is the exact same expression that the one we find in the Quran. One could also look at these verses as describing a body of saltwater, a saltwater sea that will be located near a freshwater sea, but separated by a dry land, a barrier, like it is said in the Quran. But yet they would be connected by rivers, for example, allowing the saltwater and freshwater seas to meet, but not to mix. And we have such configuration in the Middle East, but it is not in Mecca, it is even not in Arabia, it is in the Levant. In the Levant, for example, we have the Lake Homs, which is not very far from the Mediterranean Sea. It is also named the Katina Lake in Syria, so near Homs. We have also the Sea of Galilee, which is not very far from the Mediterranean Sea. It's only 20 kilometers. So you could have people eating fresh meat taken from the Mediterranean Sea and the Sea of Galilee.
Another
both these lakes are connected with rivers.
I don't believe Galilee myself. Why? Because it is the only body of fresh water in the earth is known by the word sea. When the writer of the Quran talk about seas, he did not say rivers and seas. He said seas. So it have to be two body of sea, salt and fresh, and it have to be the Sea of Galilee.
I'm going to throw something in here. I'm going to throw something in for a second. This also matches the Shatt al-Arab Delta in Mesopotamia. So you're looking at like that.
It's not a sea.
But the sea, but it still matches the water, the description. It matches. You've got these two bodies.
I've looked into it, but really, Shatt al-Arab cannot be taken as a sea, a body of water.
Yeah, but he might have just misused the term or just misused it. But
besides, there is no.
But you've got the
clear partition between the Shatt al-Arab and the Persian Gulf. I really looked into it, Lloyd. I've identified every lake in the Middle East and every large body of fresh water. And so the Shatt al-Arab could be a candidate, but the thing is, there is no clear barrier between the Shatt al-Arab and the sea. and that's a thing that is very...
but do we know that these descriptions weren't added later? There was modification a century afterwards to try to get rid of the discrepancy. Understand? I mean, because the Quran wasn't finished editing until what, the 9th century, 10th century?
Maybe, but I'm working on the hypothesis that we have a text that mostly dates from the 7th century. And the thing is, I'm just looking at the possibilities here. Where do we find two seas that are clearly separated, but still there is a connection between them?
Yeah, but I'm not thinking of seas. I'm just thinking two bodies of water, fresh, salty, with separation, visual separation between the two types of water, and I mean, you've got clear visual separation. Yeah, go on now.
It could be something less dramatic, like wherever fresh water and seawater mix, the salt water sinks because it's heavier, and so there's always a barrier. So wherever a river meets the sea, you have that phenomenon happening, and that's what creates currents in the sea. You basically have, to some extent.
But the thing is, we have different criterions in the Quran. We have to have independent bodies of water. We have to have a separation and a connection, and we also have to have boats that can be seen from the same place sailing in the fresh water and in the salt water. If we took if we take the Quran for granted.
Well, every time, like say, I can't remember, is it the Euphrates or the Tigris that goes into the Gulf? Maybe both. But
both get together.
Is the delta where they meet. Yeah.
They're literally going from fresh water to salt water there.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And you know, the candidates I'm presenting to you are this one, for example. So the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee that are connected through the Jordan River. Also, this other one. Excuse me. I've made a mistake. I've put the same picture twice. The other candidate is also it's a Lake Homs and the Mediterranean Sea, and they are connected through the Orontes River. So there is also a connection, and the two bodies of water don't mix. But there is this last candidate that is very interesting, which is Al-Bahrain. So the Bahrain is an island on the eastern coast of Arabia, and it has been known for centuries, even in the Roman antiquity, for having an exceptional phenomenon of freshwater underground sources that flow on the beaches into the saltwater sea, and also as having submarine springs on the coast. And so here in Bahrain, for example, you can sail on a boat in the saltwater sea. You can then jump off the boat, swim a little, and go to the submarine spring on the bottom, and there you will be into fresh water. Mm-hmm. So it's a unique phenomenon, and it's very it has been known since the antiquity. And besides, Bahrain is also very known for its pearls and coral also. So it is a candidate to be considered for this location, for this two seas reference, and it's an even more appropriate candidate that it is the exact same expression as in the Quran.
If you look at the Shatt al-Arab and the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, you've got a lot of silt in the water, and that creates a visual barrier. You've got a color separation, you've got a physical sort of barrier of silt that separates. They flow deep into the ocean before they merge. I mean, so that's also potentially. I've been to Bahrain. That's interesting.
It might be, but the thing with the Shatt al-Arab, but it's also the thing is there is no candidate that fit everything. In the Shatt al-Arab, the problem is that we don't have a body of fresh water. But one could say it's the same in Bahrain.
Two major rivers have a massive delta. I mean, it's like you've got Tigris, Euphrates, a huge delta, and then you've got ocean.
Yeah, I know. I don't know the place. I've never been there, but
you definitely have
boats for this presentation.
You know, so
yeah, it's around here, Shatt al-Arab.
Yeah,
no, you don't see it very well. No, it's around here.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah. The problem we have with Muhammad's writing, or whoever wrote the Quran, There's no details about anything. If the scholars of Islam disagree about every verse, do you think we're going to come to the conclusion what two body of waters he's talking about?
Yeah.
No.
Well, the only conclusion is that it is not possible in Mecca. And this is what this presentation is about. The Mecca narrative is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I think we can agree on this conclusion.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
We might disagree whether the two seas were in Bahrain or in Palestine or in Syria or elsewhere. But one thing for sure, it cannot be in Mecca. It never was in Mecca.
Agreed.
So that
I'm
will be
looking at
the
right
conclusion of the presentation about fishermen and the conclusion of the presentation about farmers and fishermen. It cannot be in Mecca. It's obvious that the Quran describes situations that cannot, that don't fit the Islamic narrative, that contradict the Islamic narrative.
Exactly. Agreed. 100%. Mel, you were going to say?
I concur. You know, it's amazing. Let me say this as my last word. All my life in Egypt, I studied in schools, and I studied about Islam from actually when I was 6 years old. They start make us memorize one verse here, a small part of the Quran here and there. And all the studies I have done and all the teaching of the Muslim to me, growing up, even until when I was in college, I studied a couple of years Sharia, Islamic law. The major teaching, the biggest lie, which they have taught me, and all the Muslim students as well, that Islam started from Mecca and went from Mecca to the Saudi Arabia Peninsula, from Saudi Arabia Peninsula to the Northern Africa. And so it started from Mecca and grew up to now. I cannot find it. I cannot see it. It did not start from Mecca. It started somewhere else. And it went to Mecca. And that is a very hard thing to convince a Muslim. I mean, I am convinced with it because obviously the Spirit of God in me tell me all these things about Islam is a lie. But for Muslims who grew all their life from day one to believe it started in Mecca, went to Medina, and then back to Mecca, and from Mecca spread all over the world, how can you convince these people of that lie which they have been taught often enough and repeated often enough, and they believe it to be a lie? It is difficult. It is hard. I mean, I don't know what Muslim we can convince that everything they know about Islam is wrong, including the birth of Islam, but the location.
I think
of the birth.
We need to stop entertaining their doctrinal arguments, which just go in circles because you can make up any old story, and have them first justify their existence historically. Because, I mean, we are arguing here, but they haven't proven their authenticity, their authority, their origins in the first place. We shouldn't entertain them here when they haven't even, at square 5, when they haven't even established what right and authority they have at square 1.
Yeah. You know, right now, Lloyd, I'm working on bringing all the material which I've studied when I was growing up, high school or younger, about Muawiyah. I need to see where Muawiyah fit in that. And I don't know, Odi, are you going to do any teaching on Muawiyah and the history of Muawiyah and things of Islam with Muawiyah? Are you going to get there anywhere?
Paul might be best place for that as well.
Sorry? No, one thing we can conclude from this presentation, it was not in Mecca, for sure.
For sure,
but
I agree.
We cannot be sure that there was a unique place, because the place has to fit so many criterions. It has to be able to sustain olive trees, palm trees, pomegranates, and so on. You should be able to have cows, sheep, donkeys, horses, camels.
So it's a composite.
Okay, that's one thing. And on the other thing is it has to have fresh water, and so on.
It's a mythical.
So is it a unique place that we are looking at?
It's a mythical perfect place. Just like all the humans are composites, they are taken from various aspects of the Bible and other sources and cobbled together. I think the geography is also to some degree a composite. So you've got exaggeration, embellishment.
There is no such place.
Correct. That's exactly the point. Because look, you've got Jerusalem, that's your template. then they've got to create their version of it to sell the whole.
No, I don't agree. Jerusalem is not the template for the whole Quran. It's a template that we'll look at in next stream with Paul about the Jerusalem thesis. It's a template of the place of Abraham, Safa and Marwa, and so on. But the Quran also talks. The Quran also talks about other places. It talks about the two seas. The two seas are not in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is not a place that is very well known for its farming and its agriculture. It's not
So they take a composite and they shove things together, and boom, there you go. This place that has everything.
Sort of. But who is the they? Who is the they who take and make the composite? That's a question. And
but
the thing we can also deduct from this little Quranic study is that here we have some proclamations that have been made to a certain audience at a certain time, and in another part of the Quran we have other proclamations that have been done to another audience in another place. And the thing is, we are so influenced by the Islamic narrative that we want to imagine that it was only one audience in a unique place. And we have to get rid of this Islamic lens, because it is not what the Quran is about.
But look, I mean, this description, like they speak of corals and pools, and they speak of fresh water. I mean, you could take two places. You could take, for argument's sake, the Shatt al-Arab and Bahrain, slam them together, and then you got coral pools and fresh water. Boom, done. I mean, they could be using archetypes, because when you look at the people, they are making archetypes. They're using archetypes. The Quran has archetypes, not actual people. So they're taking ideas from myths, and then they make archetypes in many cases.
I don't think it's that sophisticated.
Sorry?
I think your explanation is too complex. The Quran is much more simple than this. It's the one who did the Quran. They were crude scribes. They did not. I don't think they had this level of imagination, the same as you, Lloyd. I think it's much more simpler.
Go on.
I mean, yes, say basically the same that Odon has said, but I'll just phrase it a little bit differently. The Quran has one origin story. Islam has a different origin story, and we try to put both of them together and make sense of it, and that's not what happened. So the Quran is written probably in different lands, most likely up in the north. It tells a different story to a different audience. When Islam appears, they have to create what we call the narrative, the standard Islamic narrative. And in order to do that, they have this book, who God knows where it came from, but we have a good idea. It's certainly from the north, and it has stuff from Ephraim and so on. They take that book and then they have to make it divine. So every time that the book says something, they have to make it about Mecca. If it says there are fishermen, that there are fields, there are farmers, they have to say that's our place. But those two things are completely disconnected. The book came from a different region, told a different story. Islam uses that pre-existing book in order to say this is holy, this comes from heaven, and let me explain it to you through the power of Ibn Kathir.
Well, you've got a northern narrative, right, the Jerusalem thesis, but now they've moved south. They've moved to a blank slate called Mecca, for argument's sake, and now they've got to fit that thesis onto a new substrate, which is this Yemeni, Meccan, Arabian culture, and they've got to merge that now. So then you've got a mixing of things.
Yeah. The mixed pieces.
If I could,
couldn't fit.
Yep, go on, please.
Go on, Paul, please.
Yeah, if I could perhaps share how I see this, and I take a rather different view to certainly to Mel and Odon, because my view is that the Quran does largely or almost entirely come from a fairly confined milieu in terms of time and place. I think it's the story, and it's the story of one person's life, well, primarily, although obviously it's had work done after that person died, so it's very difficult to pick apart now and try and reconstruct what the original what I would regard as this principal author says. But in my analysis, the early surahs are anti-Sasanian propaganda at the time when the Sasanians are besieging Jerusalem and threatening the temple re-establishment project, the project by Nehemiah ben Hushiel to re-establish temple sacrifices, not actually to build the temple, but to restore sacrifices to the temple. And that is where we get the companions of the elephant and Abu Lahab and these verses that are clearly aimed at a particular enemy who the Quran author had at that time, who I think can be identified as Khusro. Then the scene shifts, because for the Quran to be about Jerusalem, it can't have been announced in Jerusalem, because parts of the Quran are talking about capturing the Masjid al-Haram. It talks about expel them from where they have expelled you. So there clearly comes a time when the author, I like to call Muhammad, left Jerusalem and is then perhaps at the end of the Byzantine Sasanian War, at the time that Byzantium has been victorious. He sees an opportunity to capture Jerusalem, and sees that they're overstretched, they're exhausted, and during the war, the Arabs have established some sort of proto-state in Tashkistan, and so you don't have to believe that every verse in the Quran is addressed to a Jerusalem audience. Many, probably the vast majority of them, would have been declared at a time outside Jerusalem, and would have been urging people to go back in there and to conquer Jerusalem. So that would be the way that I would see it. I don't think you have to choose one or the other. It doesn't have to be about Jerusalem or about somewhere else or about one place. It could fit into a narrative.
No.
An epic they were creating, mixing fragments together. So I like what you said, an original author, an original story, and then it was changed over time.
Yeah,
Well,
I kind of agree with you.
We're getting a little bit off piece here, but yes, people tried to bury Jerusalem. They didn't, particularly after the Abbasid revolution in 750. The Abbasids really didn't like Jerusalem, and they wanted to turn everyone's attention away from Jerusalem, and they needed a fictitious place. They put it in the desert. But up until the Umayyads, they seem to have been very Jerusalem focused. One looks at the Dome of the Rock and all the buildings around there. The Umayyads seem to be very comfortable with Jerusalem having all the attention, but it's when the power is seized by the Persians and they want to take the focus of attention away from the Umayyad lands and towards Persia, and that would be in broad strokes how I would see it. Yes, come in.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that the Quran has been edited over time, and if you are still seeing a single author, despite all the hands that took twisted and checked it, that might say more about the power of the human mind to see patterns and project onto it a single author. But I think even if we allow a single author at the outset, it's definitely had more than one pair of hands writing it, because we have evidence of contradiction that's there, not just because it's moved from Mecca to Medina and all that. I think that's a cover-up story for the fact that it's inherently self-contradictory, and it's so I think it's it probably serves multiple purposes, and even the fact that there's traditions that the Quran was shorter at one stage and then was added to. I think that also lends the impression that there were multiple minds working on it, and if you give a novel writer some documents, they can turn that into a novel. You know, you could have a few surahs of a Quran and give it to someone, and they will replicate that and the style of it, and have an in-house style to match the original. So I think there's not enough evidence, but I would lean towards a plurality of authors, even if there's like a core part that might be some voice of someone who's interacting with fellow preachers, like Odin's theory.
Linguistic and mathematical now shows something like 20 authors over time, because the voice is different, the writing is different across the authors.
I tend to agree with you, Paul, but I have the same remark. I don't believe that there is only one author, for the many reasons that Mel explained. And there's another one, is just when you look at the text, you see that sometimes there is a preacher preaching, and sometimes there is someone instructing him. So at least there were these two types of authorship in the Quran. But I think also, like you, that the Quran is about a big story which centers around Jerusalem. And they try to take Jerusalem, they go to Jerusalem, they are expelled from Jerusalem, and then they eventually, they come back to Jerusalem. And this is what the Jerusalem thesis is about. Not about having everything taking place in Jerusalem, but having the story centered on Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And yes, I completely agree that the Quran isn't all one person's work. But what I would say is, in my view, I see no reason why it shouldn't mostly be one person's work. And there are some surahs I'm very skeptical about, that 113 and 114 were part of the original, were part of that person. And I think I can demonstrate clearly that the beginning of Surah 9, Surah Al-Tawbah, can't have been by the same person who wrote the other, because by that stage they are in possession of the Masjid al-Haram, and exactly. We know that or we can be fairly confident that the Quran author died before the conquest of Jerusalem. Not long. It's only, by the traditional account, Muhammad died in 632. The Arab conquerors, to use a fairly neutral title, captured Jerusalem in 637 or 638. So we could only be talking about 5 years or some period like that. But I think we can be fairly confident that, for reasons Stephen Shoemaker has put forward, that Surah Al-Tawbah was written after the death of the person who ordered the conquest in the first place and led it. But the fact that there's been lots of work done, and here and there people have added insertions, and sometimes you can find parts where the interpolation so breaks the original work that you can just look at it, even in an English translation, and say those dozen words shouldn't be there. If you take those dozen words out, it reads much more poetically. It scans. It's got wordplay. It makes sense. And somebody has come along and just added a little bit in the middle. And the more you could list these, and you see patterns between them, that they all seem to say fairly similar things, the bits that are added in. So I think it was largely the work of one person, but I totally agree that it wasn't all the work of one person, and there's this, it's, as you might say, it's had work done before it got compiled.
Now also,
by the time it was compiled, nobody could tell what was genuine and what wasn't.
I think there's a problem even if you accept that Muhammad or whoever was the author, is that all the traditions say that the Quran was written after he died. So that's that's a difficulty in itself. So unless you have the idea that he is narrating it to someone to remember, okay, remember this and write it down after I die, you're back into into that muddy water of the sin. But it's tricky. But no one knows for certain with all of this.
The thing about
I was about to accuse you of falling back on the traditional narrative. So, perhaps.
Yeah, Paul, let me just...
I pay no attention to any of these accounts of how the Quran came to be written. Again, you talk about contradictions. The accounts of how the Quran came together are some of the most contradictory and confused of all. I think is the one area where it's just not possible to find any sense in. If you were a Muslim, you wouldn't even know what to believe.
Yeah, I would have thought it would have been in their interest to say that Muhammad wrote the Quran or dictated it, or that it was written down before he died. The fact that none of the narratives say it was written during his lifetime, I would suggest, especially because it's in their interest to say it was from him, that it's not from him. It's a community producing a book based on maybe their memory of whatever the movement was saying, or maybe it was another theory. Might be the notes and letters from the preachers that got turned into a Quran later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paul and Mel and everyone. What I wanted to add is that it's not. I don't think the whole of Surah 9 has been written after the taking of Jerusalem. And beside, there are other parts within the Quran, within the other surahs, that seems to have been written in the same context. In Surah 8 and Surah 2, there are parts which look like they have been written with the context of Jerusalem having already been taken. So this would lead us to think that when the Quran was ultimately compiled, there was an edition process where bits were mixed. You see that bits from different authors and different periods of time, they were mixed and they were sort of clipped and remixed. And this is why the text is so difficult to understand. And this is why we need to get as many pieces of the puzzle as we can, and to look at them with an eagle eye, to have in order to have everything in mind. Right.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about. We could all. I don't think we're all wrong. I think we're all doing an analysis and seeing that there are different ways. JC he's a fiction author. He's looking at this with an author's eye. How would you reconstruct a narrative on the basis of what we have, right? How would you combine things? How would you take different ideas and make composites? And the story's incoherent, as Catherine says, but we all have plausible ideas, right? And I think we should be throwing them out there and evaluating them, because the truth is somewhere in there, right? And at some point, statistically, something has to be more probable. And I don't think we're going to know for sure on some things, but we can say what it's not. And I think we're all generally converging. None of us is saying, yeah, it's a place on the moon. We're all saying it's a place in the Gulf somewhere. Whether it's Shuttle Arab or whether it's Bahrain, it's not that much, but there's evidence for both. Or you can, because remember, there's red herrings, there's mistakes, there's deliberate confusion in the text. So you got polls, Bahrain or the UAE for that matter, both.
Oh, it's not even a place.
Or they trying to make a mythical place that's better than wherever you were before, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all of the above. So it's really hard, but we're not wrong, I think, in any of our speculations. right? We're all coming to logical conclusions on the basis of evidence, but at some point, once you've got it all together, we can then start matching what we have and saying, look, statistically, this is most likely probable. I used to build systems, and I mean, we couldn't predict exactly where someone's going to hit, what they're going to do, but we could say, look, this is their doctrine, these are their beliefs, these are the conditions, and it's likely they'll do this, this, and this. And you can work out very well based on probabilities. It's possible. And I think we are moving in the right direction. I don't think, and I like what Paul had to say. Paul laid it out very well. It's a great case. Odon, you make a fantastic case. So does Mal. So all of us.
It's not over, Lloyd. It's not over. In our next stream, we will look at the details of the Jerusalem thesis.
Right. No.
Masjid al-Haram, God's temple, the standing place of Abraham, and so on. And and there we will see that it's all about Jerusalem for these verses.
For sure. Look, I think Jerusalem might have been the focal point, and then it shifted because they had to go to Mecca. It's like, right, guys, let's pack our bags and move, right? So
if we're going to Jerusalem next week, I've got a final thought on Mecca, which I'd quite like to share. And it relates to Thomas the Tank Engine. I don't know if you're familiar with the Thomas the Tank Engine stories.
Yeah. We're not heathens, and you know, we know who Thomas the Tank Engine is.
Oh, so you might be me. And he knows
what do you think, Paul?
I could find Thomas the Tank Engine in the Quran. So here's my take. Thomas the Tank Engine is a series of children's books set in a fictitious island called Sodor, Sodor. Now, it was written by the Reverend W. Awdry, and where did he get the name for that island from? If you do a little bit inquisitive and you wonder where Sodor is, Sodor is the name of a Viking kingdom back in the day. They had the northern islands, which were the Orkneys and the where's further out in the Orkneys, and then you've got the southern islands, which were the Hebrides. And so Sodor was a Viking kingdom, short-lived, that was out in the around the Hebridean Islands. Now, the church at one stage, before it was the Church of England, before the Reformation, it was convenient to have a diocese that covered all the islands that were on the west coast of Great Britain. And so they called this diocese Sodor and Man. So it covered the Viking kingdom of Sodor, which is the Hebrides, and also the Isle of Man. When the Church of Scotland went its independent way, the Church of England kept the name of the diocese. So if you look at a list of Church of England dioceses, you would find a diocese called Sodor and Man. But if you looked on a map and see where does this diocese cover, you would only see one island, which was the Isle of Man, because this diocese covered areas that are then part of the Church of Scotland. So you've got this name, Sodor and Man, because Sodor is a name without a place. It's when Reverend W. Awdry, who was, of course, was himself as Church of England clergyman, he wanted a name for a place, and he said he was always intrigued by this diocese which had two places but only one island, and he imagined that there must be another island somewhere just beyond the Isle of Man that somehow wasn't on anybody's chart, and so he put his fictitious and rather implausible island with the highest ratio of steam engines to people, I think, of any place as it was ever imagined, on this fictitious island. And I think that something rather similar happened with Mecca, that you want somewhere to put the Muhammad story. You look through the Quran, which actually is very short on place names. You find Mecca as a name. You look on the maps. You can't find Mecca on any of the maps. So you put it out in the desert in the same way that the Reverend W. Awdry put Sodor out in the middle of the North Sea, knowing that no one's ever going to look and look too closely and check for it. And that's essentially why you find Thomas the Tank Engine in the Quran.
Right.
If you have a name without a place, people will find somewhere for it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, they leave it vague so that your mind fills in the blank.
Like El Dorado or Xanadu.
Yeah. No, I mean, you fill in the blank because look, they leave it vague deliberately, because if they don't give you the details, you can't prove them wrong. So there's a whole bunch of, right? So yeah, we should call it a night here. I mean, this has been very thought-provoking. Everyone's sitting here like, yeah, we're all deep in thought here, I think.
Yep. Yep. You know what? I can close with the famous statement of my president. That is President Muhammad Anwar el-Sadat. Everybody know him to be Sadat. When they were trying to make the peace between Egypt and Israel, and they asked him the question, it was a direct question: will you make peace with Israel if we give you the entire land of Sinai back? And he thought about it for a second, and he said, maybe yes, maybe no, but exactly I don't know. And that's exactly how I feel about all the different opinions has been given today on that subject, because I don't know. I wish I can know. If somebody can help me to put my finger on it and feel it and prove it and explain it to others, I'll be appreciative. But that's the beauty of the Quran.
Well, at least Usama didn't say we're a great team except for Lloyd.
I think the Quran is simply the Mahmed files that got redacted to get rid of the names of places. It's a great way of
it's
hiding
the Epstein files of 732. How's that?
But can you imagine, guys? I'm going to get serious for a minute here. When I open the Bible and I see a book, it's called the Book of Acts, and then I see a bunch of letters written by this guy. His name is Paul. And in seminary, I studied, and I can tie his letters with his traveling ministry with the Book of Acts. I mean, seriously, the Book of Acts is written by Luke. The writings of the letters written by different people, as we know, that this was written by this. Paul is the author, but some other people pinned it down for him for whatever reason it is. We can get to it later. But I can tie the Bible, the trips, and the travel of the Apostle Paul on his mission trips. They're big, they're huge. I can go right now. Right now, I can fly and get to these cities where the Apostle Paul were traveling. And I put the Bible as a GPS, as a blue line. I follow it to go the trips. So why can't we do that about just the simple fact is Mecca? For heaven's sake, I'm not asking to give me the history of Islam, just one city. I can't. Good luck.
Yeah, no, it cannot be used for archaeology. It's useless. It's myth. It's myth.
Somebody was saying, well, Paul was in the beginning of Christianity, the first century of Christianity. I can go to Abraham's trips. No kidding. I can go to Genesis, written literally 1,500 years before Christ, took place 1,800, 1,900 years before Christ. And I can tell you the trips of Abraham when he left Iraq, went to the land of Canaan, went down to Egypt, came back to Canaan, went to the Abimelech land, came back to Canaan. I mean, we can do the same thing with every trip in the Bible. Hundreds of years before Muhammad. You may think if Muhammad came 600 years after Christ, we have better map, better direction, better details, better information about everything. When in reality, we know nothing.
Yeah, and that's actually very telling.
The lack of detail has to be on purpose. It's not. They could have easily made it so much easier to understand everything.
Yeah.
I don't completely agree with you, Usama. I'm sorry. We don't know nothing. We know little, and the little we know contradicts Islam completely.
That's true. That's true. But I'm sorry. If I'm a Muslim guy try to defend my theory of Mecca, I have nothing to share. I literally am empty. I'm empty hands.
One of the problems is that, like Odon said before, we're just obsessed with the narrative. We keep reading the narrative. So when we look at the Quran, because that's what we are reading, we cannot see past that wall and realize that maybe there are some diacritics that are applied in the wrong places. And actually there was a city there, but now the word has been hidden. So we cannot see this. We cannot see verses that have been purposely removed because we cannot find them. So the enemy is the narrative. Once we realize, hey, the narrative is not what we've been told, there are two different origins here, then we can look at the Quran with a fresh pair of eyes and hopefully get there. And actually, maybe once we are finished with the presentations about the Jerusalem thesis, we should have a conversation like this where we just go through the narrative, and maybe with all of that we have learned through the series, we can try to put together when the narrative changed, by whom. Maybe we can find a few more details.
I hope so. I sure hope so.
Okay, yeah, let's call it a night here then. I think it's been great. I think we're all now, our heads are buzzing. So this has been interesting. Yeah, but this 15th century trip or 16th century trip by this Italian, I mean, that's interesting. That's an oddity for sure.
Yeah, by the way, in that account, he said, according to him, God had cursed the land because absolutely nothing grew in that region.
There we go.
Yeah. So yeah. So guys, we'll pick this up again next week. Usama, I've only got a couple more episodes to do on the Quran, and then I go into the witness protection program.
Listen, that is only part one. Don't confuse our audience, please.
Well, I'm going to create an AI me, and then you can.
No. The Bible said, not the Bible. Muhammad said, let's begin to Muhammad. Don't start something unless you finish it. It will be better if you don't start it. Okay? I'm quoting you, Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him.
You know what? I'm going to go to Mecca. I'm going to dig this guy up. And I'm going to shoot him in the head. So, guys, thanks. It's been fantastic. It's been really, really good.
God bless you all.
Yeah. Right. So, guys, thank you. We'll pick this up next week, but this has been fantastic. Really excellent research. Thanks all for coming. And thank you to the audience. Please, guys, like, share, subscribe. Everyone should be described in the description, so please support their channels as well. Thanks, everyone. Take care and good night. God bless.
Good night.
Right.
Take care.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie!
26 of the Quran.
26 different Quran!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
Stay away from these translations. They are propaganda.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?